Pakistan. 1/3 of the country is submerged, the deadliest floods in its history. The country's climate minister drew attention to the ongoing inequities between Pakistan and Western powers.
That's global warming. And yes, I would like not to be hectored by Western communities that have gotten rich on the back of burning fossil fuels. We are less than a 1% emitter in the world.
Since June, the floods have affected 33 million and killed roughly 1,500. How much responsibility do big polluters in the West have for natural disasters like the floods in Pakistan, which were intensified by climate change?
You have all seen the appalling images from Pakistan, and this is happening at just 1.2 degrees of global warming.
Climate change contributed to these floods. True. In a recent study, researchers found that climate change is likely to have played a role in the floods. Researchers said climate change may have increased the intensity of rainfall. The majority of floodwater came from extreme monsoons, which was increased in intensity by up to 50% in the last 100 years. Researchers say this increase would have been less likely without a rapid increase in greenhouse gas emissions caused by burning fossil fuels. The record rainfall that fell in August over Sindh and Balochistan, the worst affected regions in Pakistan's south, were 726% and 590% higher than the monthly average. Scientists said that because of the natural variability from year to year in monsoon rains in the region, their model contained inherent uncertainties. But even if monsoon variability makes it difficult to quantify the exact impact of climate change on rainfall, Pakistan's extreme flooding is exactly what climate projections have been predicting for years. As well as heavy rainfall, Pakistan's floods were also made worse by rivers breaking their banks and glacial lakes bursting. All in all, it's safe to say the intense rainfall that caused the devastating floods was made worse by global heating.
Because of climate change and because of the fact that emissions are still rising and not stalling or falling, every year the chance of record-breaking heat waves is higher basically than the year before.
So it's clear that Pakistan's deadly floods were linked to climate change. But who is responsible? Many in Pakistan are blaming the West. Some called out climate colonialism and pointed to demands for reparations. Big polluters in the West contribute to climate-driven natural disasters. True. But it's a bit trickier than that. Let's explain. Changing weather patterns and extreme weather events are linked to rising temperatures. The planet's warming is caused by greenhouse gas emissions, which trap the sun's heat in our atmosphere as they blanket the Earth. And who emits greenhouse gases? Well, almost everyone. But rich countries are responsible for around 50% of greenhouse gases released from fossil fuels and industry.
The global climate system is all connected. That means that the emissions that happen in Pakistan and the emissions that happen all around the world are getting into the atmosphere where they mix and distribute around the globe. So even emissions that happen somewhere else will affect regions that are far off from where they originally happened.
So we all play a role in worsening the climate crisis, but the world's wealthiest nations typically emit more and so bear more responsibility. Many have called out the injustice of countries with lower carbon footprints often being more severely impacted by climate change than the top emitters. Let's look at Pakistan. It accounts for less than 1% of the world's emissions, but it's the 8th most vulnerable nation to the climate crisis. Top emitters today include the US and the EU, amongst others. Countries like China and India are also on the list. But climate activists say that the global north is still more responsible for historical emissions. That's because India and China are relatively new to industrialization. And China has become a bigger carbon emitter only over the last 2 decades. And given its population, India emits less than its fair share for global emissions compared to countries like the US. So while nearly all of us contribute to climate change through our emissions, it is true that Western countries are disproportionately more responsible. Some social media users have also said Pakistan's poor disaster management has caused the floods to get worse. True. Climate change has apparently been a low priority for the Pakistani government for a long time. Political parties rarely include it in their platforms, and experts say the government ignored warning signs and was not disaster prepared, despite having faced a massive flood in 2010.
Sometimes there were some illegal constructions which caused urban flooding as well. People have also pointed towards to beefing up the capacities of Pakistan Meteorological Department to predict or forecast such events with a good lag time. But the local governments, the DDMs as we call them, the District Disaster Management Authorities, those were not very viable. Either they were non-existent or they were not very viable.
It is true that climate change is a key factor for the deadly floods in Pakistan, and its poor disaster management has worsened the situation. Many experts agree, and studies show that the West has a responsibility towards climate crisis, but not for individual extreme weather events like the floods in Pakistan. Have you seen false claims and fakes on climate change? Write in the comments or send us an email to factchecking@dw.com.